real quick, guys, we do need to have a little talk. This is Uncle Cam talking to you guys. So when the Arcanas were finally announced, I got bombarded with messages of saying, hey, what's better? Which lens is better between the new Blazar Vipers and the DZO Arcanas? I will be doing a light comparison in this video, which shout out to DZO. They said they're fine with that and they are sponsoring this video. So I'm being paid, I'm not being paid crazy money. Now I found myself getting pretty annoyed every time I got a DM or a text or a message, email asking, hey, which lens is better? This is a huge issue that we're having in this community when it comes to lenses, because marketing has been telling us, hey, our new lens is sharp edge to edge. We have the perfect sharpness. We have the perfect coatings. There's zero defects, yada, yada, yada. But then when we go and watch Hollywood movies, it's the story's polar opposite. For instance, Greg Fraser, one of my all-time favorite DPs right now, his latest film, Hail Mary, amazing film. They shot vertiscope, which is vertical anamorphic, which is just incredible. But there's a part in the films, well, there's several parts where they go back into the past when they're back on planet Earth, and they go back to horizontal anamorphics. And it's kind of stark, and it almost took me out of the film for a moment because how different it looked from the space footage. And another reason why the difference was so stark was how soft the lenses were, whatever anamorphics they were using, I'm not sure. But you could feel the softness, you could see the glowiness coming out of those lenses almost. Let's also look at the film Batman that Greg Fraser DP'd. People worshipped that movie, except there's not one single sharp image in that film. All of it's heavily distorted, so much character, so much just distortion in the edges, and it's all over the place. I absolutely love that. And then we have iconic films like La La Land. There's so much anamorphic distortion in that film. And anybody who's been following my channel for a while, you guys know I've been attacked relentlessly by other creators even for the fact that I championed flawed anamorphics. And to me, they're not flawed. They are vintage, character-rich type looking anamorphics. And the reason I like that is because all the films that I love have that look, especially the vintage films all the way to the modern films. Circle back to Greg Fraser, even the film The Creator, they use a vintage anamorphic on that. So this whole thing of like people looking at lenses as, hey, what's clinically better? But at the same time, they're stacking on diffusion filters, and then in post, they're doing halation and film grain, trying to soften up the image. So I'm just like, at what point did marketing start winning over people having their own opinion and being confident in what their own brain's telling them that they like? So this will all go hand in hand with this review, because to me, these lenses, one's not better than the other. They're polar opposite, yet they kind of look similar at the same time, which is very odd, but totally different optical design. Now, before we start doing the comparisons, let's talk about the Arcanas, because yes, DZO is sponsoring this video. And I do need to clear another thing up here. Just because this is sponsored does not mean I'm being paid to do a positive review. A lot of the times, my brand partnerships, they understand if I'm going to talk about something, one, I need to like it. If you don't believe me, go ask Suray. There's several lenses I've sent back to them because I just didn't care for them. And the last video I did on the Suray, they made me promise I would follow through on the video. So that's what I did. And it's not the most positive video for them. Obviously, whatever's money's left over, I would love to have. But at this point, I've already spent over the budget. So now I'm just paying out my own pocket now. So all the coverage I've done for Blazar in the past, that was purely because I love what Blazar has been doing. They were the first affordable anamorphic company to provide us juicy, character-rich anamorphics that weren't just trying to be clinical, because those clinical, affordable ones look nothing like we see in films. And now DZO finally brought a competitor for Blazar, and I'm incredibly excited because we need competition. Competition is good for me. Competition is good for you. It's good for everybody who's actually purchasing and using these lenses, because competition means they could push each other and they could, grow on top of each other. So with all that said, let's talk about the Arcanas now. All right, the DZO Arcanas. I'm currently on the 45mm. Again, I'm very excited for these lenses because they are finally some competition in this affordable anamorphic market. And not only are they just competition, but they are doing some very unique, special things here. So let's talk about these lenses, and then we'll start diving into the image comparison between the Vipers. So as I started to test these more, I was, like I said earlier in the video, I was kind of confused on if I liked them or not, because there's a lot of things about these lenses that I do like and a lot of things that I'm not used to. So they're growing on me, and I'm kind of, again, they're a whole new type of looking lens. while also being kind of similar to the Viper. So let's get some of the technical stuff out of the way. These are all T2.1 lenses, and they stole a trick from Blazar, and Blazar stole that trick from Hawk, which is the oval aperture. So this is the trick that we used to do back in the day. All of us anamorphic lovers, we would get oval masks. We would put them inside of the lens right near the aperture blades or in the rear of the lens, and it'll help create anamorphic bokeh. The issue was when you started to close down your lens, obviously your aperture blades would go past that oval mask, and so you lose all that anamorphic looking bokeh. Well, Hawk designed their iris, their aperture blades, into an oval, and so as you closed it down, the aperture oval would stay an oval shape. So Blazar did that in the Blazar Mantis, and now DZO is using that trick as well in these Arcanas. So these are 1.5x full frame anamorphics, but we have 2x looking bokeh because of that mask. Absolutely love the way that these look, even though they are very clean. Though the Arcanas are T2.1, the lens are actually more around probably 1.6 to 1.8 speed lenses, but when they put that oval mask in, obviously you're losing some of that light transmission. So you know that bokeh separation, you're gonna get even more of that at T2.1 versus a T2.1 spherical lens. Now, because of that oval insert, we do have some vignetting on these lenses, which I don't mind vignetting. I also don't mind if a lens doesn't vignette. I kind of like an in-between, really, like a soft vignetting, which these have wide open, and even as you close down, you might still have a little bit of that vignetting. And again, that's from the oval aperture that's in these lenses. They all have barrel distortion as well. 45 has a decent control on it. The 75 is almost neutral. The 32 millimeter though is extra special. It has very extreme barrel distortion, which personally I love. This was a thing with the previous Blazar lenses. A lot of people were complaining about the barrel distortion, how intense it was on some of the Blazar lenses, which again, personally, I always champion because I love that distortion. As we just went over in the beginning of this video, some of my favorite films have that intense barrel distortion when they're using more vintage anamorphics. The 32 millimeter really reminds me of that look, and it's consistent throughout. And so, you know, you're gonna get a little bit more squeeze and compression on the edges, but again, I kind of like that myself. So yeah, I'm kind of interested in seeing what people are going to think about this, because all the people that complained about the Blazar's distortion, I would assume they're going to complain about the DZO ARCANA 32 millimeter distortion, but I'm going to place bets that they're not going to. But from there, let's talk about the focus breathing. There's very intense focus breathing on these, which once again, I don't mind myself, especially when it comes to anamorphics. When I look at anamorphics, I'm getting them because I want that texture. I want that distortion. I want those quote unquote flaws, which I call character, because for me, it kind of adds more depth to my storytelling, whether it be a silly YouTube video like this or a more intentional short film piece that I want to make, or even a documentary piece. But in the comparison, you're going to really see the difference between this and the Vipers. Yeah, the focus breathing is more on the horizontal field. And so you're going to see it's the focal length almost changes. For instance, on 32 millimeter, once we go into minimum focus, you're going to see you're going to get a few more millimeters onto the edges there. So I know for some people who need that control and that precision, say if you're doing commercial work, something like that, then, you know, the focus breathing might be too intense for you. But anybody who's embracing that more vintage, that more narrative, that more stoic, painterly look, the focus breathing might not be an issue for you. Again, this is subjective. Objectively, heavy focus breathing. Subjectively, do you like it or not? Let's talk about build quality, and I'm gonna go with sharpness, because that's, I think, the key thing to these lenses. Build quality, I'm very impressed with the build quality on here. Let me just grab a Blazar Viper real quick. I guess this will slowly start getting us into the comparison here. So the Blazar Viper, we can see we have a very like vintage looking lens here. The coatings on them, you know, they look sparkly. They don't look like, I can't tell if that's the actual metal or if that's a coating on there giving it that metal sparkly look. But obviously both of these lenses are made out of metal. I don't know what kind of metals, but they feel very similar in weight, honestly. But then the DZO Arcana coatings, this feels amazing. I actually like the coating way more on the lens housing on the Arcanas than I do on the Vipers, but I like the Viper design more. It just looks super cool. It looks like an old Panavision lens, but the Arcana looks more like a modern type lens, which I like as well. But what's really singing to me is this goldish, bronzy coating on here. I absolutely love the coating on here. None of this really matters at the end of the day, but you know, this is just flavor. For the flange distance, they have pretty short flange distance on the back there. All of them are clearing my MoFosh. But I do have to say, I do have the new Mofage 2, which has another 1 or 2 millimeters of depth. So that's the one I've been using with it, and they all clear in that. I haven't tried the older one yet, but I think it should clear. Now let's talk about the flares and the sharpness, because I think those are going to be the two key factors that dictate what people are going to end up gravitating towards. So when it comes to the DZO Arcanas, the flares, I have mixed opinions so far, and it's difficult. I can't really have an official opinion on them because these are pre-production units that I have, and 2 of them are amber flared and 1 of them are silver flared. DZO is only selling the silver version. Now, I sent them a long email, very long, dense email explaining the need for blue flares in this market, because Blazar stopped making them, because there's been a whole false narrative around blue flares. The Star Trek film came out. Next thing you know, 1 or 2 videos came out saying how blue flares are corny and they're for sci-fi movies. And they were coming from people who aren't filmmakers, who, aren't educated about anamorphics, aren't educated about filmmaking. Next thing you know, that opinion, everybody's just being a sheep and copying that opinion. And then you show them vintage films, iconic movies to this day that have blue flares, and they have nothing to say. So this whole narrative spun way out of control, and it's now dictated the market. So now everybody thinks blue flares are corny, but I'm pretty confident that that's not people's real opinions. I think people are just repeating what they're hearing. So anyways, I sent them a very long, in-depth email. Shockingly, they came back, said they're going to start working on blue flares. They asked me not to talk about this, but I can't help it because I wanted to try to push them to make them. I'm sorry, DZO, that I'm putting this in here. They said that they're going to do it. I didn't believe them. Brands say a lot of things that I don't believe and I never say because I'm like, I highly doubt it. Well, they ended up sending me a few different sample images of different type of blue flares that they did on the Arcanas. I was shocked. And I got very excited. But then they said they're not sure if they're going to do it or not. Because obviously, they're not going to put those resources into creating blue flares if people aren't going to buy them. So I'm trying my best here to re-educate people of having your own opinion. Just don't repeat. Anytime I hear somebody say, oh, blue flares are for sci-fi, immediately they are a sheep. They are just repeating what they've been told. Because there are so many action films, drama films, like poetic, just iconic movies that are not sci-fi films that have blue flares in them. So anybody who's saying that, you are a sheep, stop saying that, please. Because again, these narratives, they spin out of control. Please, people, please be confident in your own opinion. And again, it's okay if you don't like blue flares. I understand. I'm sorry. Let's talk about sharpness now. These lenses, the sharpness is what confuses me on these lenses, because we have the 2x bokeh character, but we have almost 0 chromatic aberrations, which at first I was like, it's not a bad thing, but I don't know if I love that. Because again, you guys know I love very character-rich anamorphics. So at first I was like, I don't think I like that. But as I started to use them, I was like, okay, I don't mind it. The lens design, I'm very impressed with the way the lens optics that they're using in this, but I'm very confused at the same time. So when DZO first sent me these lenses, they didn't really give me much information, but I started to guess some of the information. Obviously, I've been covering anamorphics for the past few years now, so I've learned a lot about lens design. And then I brought up to them, I was like, hey, these lenses kind of remind me of APO lenses that I've used before. I started to ask, are you guys using a spherical elements? Like, what are you guys doing to get that type of sharpness? The first time I tried these, I literally thought my cameras had digital sharpness turned all the way up or something. That's how freaking sharp they were. And that's why I was confused, because usually when I use anamorphics, I don't like that sharpness. I use them to get away from that sharpness and to create more softness. But again, the bokeh still has some texture and character to it, some very subtle chromatic aberrations. But then the points that were in focus, even wide open, I was like, I've never seen that on a budget anamorphic before. So after bugging my DZO rep so much, she finally gave me all the information. So the 32mm has 3 ED elements, 3 high refractive elements, and 3 cylindrical elements. So those ED elements, though, those are part of the lens formula to create APO. Now, APO doesn't have an official standard, at least I don't think it does. And so every company has a different way of rating of what APO is. So that's the 32mm. The 45mm has 4 ED elements, 4 high refractive elements, and 2 cylindrical elements. And the 75mm has 3 ED elements, 4 high refractive elements, and 4 cylindrical elements. So that lens design, that's a pretty clean high-end lens design. And then the fact that they put the oval iris in there as well and made these basically super speed lenses, even though they're rated at T2.1, all that combined together, That's how we're getting the look out of these lenses. I am incredibly impressed with that. Yeah, all that said, I am so impressed with the sharpness on this. Currently, we have the Arcana 32mm. We are wide open. Minimum focus is 1 foot and 7 inches. And then I want to also test the aperture that we spoke about. So I'm going to start closing it down and you'll see it stays an oval. It holds like a consistent stretch factor. So that's that oval aperture doing its work. I guess I'll do a focus rack too over here. So you can see it's going to infinity and then back to minimum. You can see there's a lot of focus breathing. Personally, I don't mind that, but I'm about to put the Viper 35mm on and you're going to see focus breathing looks pretty magical on it. So to start off, I'm going to match the minimum focus. So since this is 1 foot and 7 inches, we are wide open. And again, now we are on the Blazar Viper 35mm. You can see the bokeh definitely has a different look. I like them both. And you can also see the light that I have outside my window is flaring out the lens a little bit more. But I'm going to go to the Viper's 35mm minimum focus, which is a little bit better than the Arcana. So we're going to go for 1 foot and 7 inches all the way to 1 foot and 3 inches. So you saw how much more bokeh you get out of this at minimum focus. Obviously, if you don't need minimum focus, doesn't really matter. Now let's do our focus rack. So you guys are going to see that focus breathing's pretty beautiful. And you can see our bokeh also holds on there. Let's do our aperture test. See the bokeh holds too. Wide open, it has some rough edges. And then when I close down to go from T2.1 to T2.8, it smooths out. So really beautiful. And you can see that flaring goes away at a split, a T21, T28 split. Then open back up, there's more flaring there. Okay, next up we have the mid-range. Those are going to be the Arcana 45 and the Viper 50. Start with the Arcana first. Once again, bokeh looks great. Let's do our aperture test. And it holds throughout the range. You can see the flare is intense. And we are at minimum focus, which is 1 feet and 9 inches. 1 foot and 9 inches. Let's do our focus rack. You're going to see the focus breathing. All of a sudden, that whole door frame over here comes into frame. When I go back to minimum focus, all of a sudden, that door frame disappears. Again, when it comes to anamorphics, go watch any Tarantino film or film that uses vintage anamorphic lenses. There's intense focus breathing on it. I don't mind that when it comes to anamorphics. And also, we can see on top of the bokeh, there's a weird slice hitting into the aperture. I don't know if that's going to be on the final production units. Again, these are pre-production lenses I have here. Okay, time for the Viper 50. Minimum focus on here is only 2 feet and 2 inches. Again, the Arcana was 1 foot and 9 inches. So the minimum focus on the Arcana 45 is better than the Viper 50. We're bouncing back and forth here. Let's do our aperture test. See the bokeh holds too. I feel like the 45 Arcana might have more D-stretch bokeh. I'm not sure. Let's do our focus rack. Once again, there's almost zero focus breathing on that. What the heck? I didn't even notice that before, that there's zero focus breathing on these lenses. That's pretty cool. Huh. Again, I don't mind focus breathing anamorphics. I don't have an issue with either or. Honestly, don't like one more than the other in terms of that. Now, time for the Arcana 75mm. We're at minimum focus, which is 2 feet and 7 inches. And let's do our aperture test here. So yeah, the aperture holds on there, of course. We're still getting the same thing when we're wide open. The bokeh has some de-shaping happening to it. And it cleans up right around there. So at T28, we have more smoother bokeh. Personally, I don't really mind that. You know, I'm not trying to get perfect bokeh in terms of anamorphics. Let's do our focus rack on the 75. So again, same type of focus breathing. You see that light stand in the background over there. As I go to infinity focus, all of a sudden, we're getting a couple extra lights into the edges over there. All right, time to do the Viper 75mm now. All right, so now we're on the Blazar Viper. We're wide open, 2 feet and 5 inches, wide open. Let's do our aperture test. So aperture stays consistent as well. All right, let's test the focus breathing now. So the only other lens that I know that has focus breathing that's only on the vertical axis, as we are seeing on the Vipers here, are Panavision lenses. Panavision lenses have that vertical iconic focus breathing. Yeah, these are looking pretty good. All right, guys, let's do our flaring test. We're gonna have multiple locations, outdoors and indoors, for all of these tests here. So here we go. You guys can see I have a flashlight in the back of there, and I have a 900 watt light coming through the window over there. This is the Arcana 32 millimeter. And yeah, from what I can see from the back of the picture screen, looks okay. And nothing to, like, you know, scream about. Viper 35 millimeter. From what I can see from the back of the screen, you can see there's a little bit more going on. So this is going to be super subjective here. Some people are going to like the cleaner flares in the Arcana. Other people might like the more busy flares on the Blazar Vipers here. I personally am leaning more towards the Vipers, but again, neither of them are like, oh my God. So I don't really think there's a winner there. All right, now we're on the Arcana 45 millimeter. I will say of the set Arcanas, this is probably my favorite one because the flares are a little bit busy, but what I don't like about the Arcana flares is this stark flare right here. It's just kind of, it doesn't blend that well in my opinion. I also do need to state that 2 of my Arcanas are amber flares, which they will not be selling. They will only be doing the silver flares. So this is the Blazar Viper 50 millimeter. You can already see we have more busy flares going on, which personally I prefer. But again, just because I prefer it does not mean you need to prefer it too. You need to pick whatever one stood out to you. Like whatever lens you're like, ooh, that's a flare I like. That's one you should like. Don't like something just because I'm saying I like it. We're on the Arcana 75 millimeter. Now this is one of the amber flare ones, which again, they are not selling. I don't have a silver flare one to test. And when they change the coatings, it can affect the way that the flares look. So, you know, this flare test might be a little bit pointless. Highly suggest to go watch some of the other guys' videos. So already the Viper 75's flares, oh my God, that's okay. I'm loving that flare. Again, this is a subjective opinion. This is just what I like. If you like the cleaner flares from the Arcanas because you shoot more cleaner stuff, stick with the Arcana. Now time for our sharpness test. Grandpa has to put his prescriptions on. Again, I'm starting on the Arcana 32 millimeter. Pulling focus on here because of how sharp these lenses are. It's so freaking easy for stuff like this. So this is the Arcana 32 millimeter. We're wide open and I'm just focused on my flashlight right there. I guess we'll run through the test. This is T2.8, T4, T5.6. Personally, I don't even want to bother going through the focus range because even wide open, these are so freaking sharp and clean. Let's do the Viper 35 millimeter. We're now on the Viper 35 millimeter. And it's softer. It's definitely still sharp. It's the sharpest lens Blazar has made. But I will say the optics and the Arcanas are definitely more higher quality, I guess we'll say, than the Vipers are, at least from my knowledge. Now, T2.1, T2.8, T4, T5.6. So you guys can see wide open, and yes, we had some aberrations, but I don't mind it. And then once we go to, what is that? Around T4, it cleans up a lot more, but it's still not gonna be as sharp as Arcanas. All right, now we're on the Arcana 45 millimeter wide open. You can see the sharpness is beautiful. Honestly, guys, I like both of these lenses equally. What confuses me and what makes it hard for me is choosing when to use which. Okay, now we're on the Viper 50 millimeter. So again, they look, I think a normal person wouldn't be able to tell a difference at all. But us pretentious filmmakers, obviously, you know, we might see some of the differences here. So there we go. This is the Arcana 75 millimeter. We are wide open. This looks beautiful. I have zero issues with the way that this looks. I absolutely love it, actually. So yeah, I'm loving the way that this looks. Beautiful. All right, let's do the Viper 75. So yeah, on the Viper, we're now on the 75 millimeter. I could barely see a hint of that focus peaking on those little letters there. But yeah, that looks great too. I have zero complaints on either of these lenses, honestly. So yeah, as you guys can see, the sharpness, I'm a little bit confused. At times, I really like it. At other times, it's too sharp, which is fine because I could go and I can muddy it up back in post, just like I was talking about in the beginning of the video. And while at times, the Arcanas and the Vipers do look very similar, there's some core differences here. Obviously, the DZO Arcanas are incredibly sharp, way sharper than the Blazar Vipers, but that does not mean that the Arcanas are better. What that means is if someone wants that extra sharpness, then yes, the Arcana are better. But if you're somebody that wants more of a softer vintage looking anamorphic, then the Vipers are gonna be better. On top of that, the DZO Arcanas have almost zero chromatic aberrations, which is an amazing feat that they were able to accomplish there. And while I really love the bokeh that I get out of the DZO Arcanas, you know, I do like the aberrations that the Vipers have and a little bit more of the softer bokeh and the texture that the bokeh has. The Arcanas do have a lot of texture in their bokeh as well, but it's like a sharper texture. So I don't like more over than the other when it comes to the bokeh. They're totally different flavors there. So, you know, even myself, I'm even confused. I'm like, I don't know if I like one of these lenses better than the other. I think I like certain things better than the other. But again, that's not an answer for me either. So I don't know. The distortion, this is where things are to get kind of interesting. I'm really interested in seeing what you guys are going to think about the distortion between these two lenses, because for years now, since Blazar has been making lenses, people have been bitching and crying about the distortion on the Blazar lenses. While the Vipers have almost zero distortion. Even the focus breathing, they went more for Panavision focus breathing, which is iconic. That being, you know, when the focus breathing happens, it's more on the vertical axis. You don't see it too much on the horizontal field of view. But the DZO Arcanas have a lot of barrel distortion, which I love, but the focus breathing is way more intense on the Arcanas. And so if anybody who I've seen bitched about the Blazars previously having heavy distortion, but now they're praising the DZO Arcanas, I think that goes to show it might be more brand bias. I'm really excited to see the conversations unfold in the comment section on this video. For my official opinion, again, I am really confused because I love the way both of these lenses use. Some things I can state for sure. When it comes to flares, I think the Vipers win. When it comes to sharpness, it's subjective. Objectively, the DZOs are sharper. When it comes to the distortion, I absolutely love the distortion on the 32 millimeter Arcana. I love that. The issue is with wider anamorphics, obviously we're losing a lot of that compression that you get with tighter focal lengths. So you start losing a little bit of the anamorphic look unless you get a little bit tighter and go to minimum focus. But since the Arcana 32 millimeter has such intense barrel distortion, it kind of bakes in a little bit more of the anamorphic juice that I'm used to in my favorite film. So I don't know, you guys can see, I think this is an amazing fight between these two brands here. And I love both set of lenses. And so this is why I'm just ultimately confused, because moving forward, I don't know when I'm going to use what. Yeah, hope you guys enjoy this video. We are in amazing times now. For a while there in the budget anamorphic market, all we had was just shit options. Everything was just overly sharp, zero character. And I think that confused a lot of the market. I think confused a lot of people who are getting introduced to anamorphics of like, oh, that's what anamorphics is supposed to look like. Meanwhile, they're watching movies that don't represent that at all. And I think it's safe to say though that Blazar has kind of started to take over the market because they were just pumping out so much and everything was so unique. And now finally we have a freaking competitor and we have been needing this and they're taking it to a whole nother level with the sharpness. So very exciting times. I'm grateful to be a part of, you know, this disruption in the markets of affordable anamorphics. And yeah, that's it.